Masters community, welcome back to another video with Kaiokris. We're going to be doing our second variation of the Nationals tier list. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a long video. We have quite a few leaders to go through, and I decided to choose leaders that I would feel like we would probably see. So, something that's not included on this list, to my personal opinion, I probably don't think it's even good enough to bring to Nats. But you know, of course, these lists are just my opinion, right? So if you guys have a different opinion, that's fine. So we have 5 tiers here, and obviously we can kind of look through and kind of know what some of these mean, right? Meta defining, and I think we should probably give my definition of what this means. So, because I see different content creators do, and it's not just for Masters, it's for Fusion World as well and other card games, is meta defining should be decks that are, for one, very prominent in the meta, right? You're seeing them a lot, so high playability. Also, they're topping a lot, so we have some form of data to back this up, right? There's going to be top 16 placings, top 4 placings, events that they have won, etc., right? Also, this doesn't necessarily mean you're citing a ton of cards to deal with these decks, but these are decks that you will generally see the most of in Top Cut or in the top tables, so to speak. So you should be prepared for those. Whether that's your main decking cards or your side decking cards, you're going to be prepared for these decks, okay? We have Tier A, which is the competitive tier. This is going to be decks you'll probably see just a lot of that maybe don't fit into the category of being something that everyone is sort of focused on siding or main decking options against, or tech options against. We have Rogue tier, which will probably be right outside of potentially being a competitive powerhouse. So these are decks that you'll probably see kind of niche ideas. Maybe they're good into certain decks into the meta, but not into others. We have C tier, which these are going to be decks that lack something. So I'll kind of fill in the blank when I talk about those decks. Some of them have really good reasons. Some of them are a little more distinctive, and we'll talk about those. And then DRT is trash. I try not to include a lot of those decks just because I don't really think they should even be on the list anyway if you're just going to put them in trash. But I had to do it for content purposes to make sure that I had enough decks. And there's really not going to be a lot of those decks in here because most of those decks I just decided not to include in the video in general because I just thought it was kind of a waste of time. So now there's one spot I did not talk about, which is going to be the Gatekeeper tier. All right. So we're actually going to put Zamasu in this Gatekeeper tier. So I do not find Zamasu to be meta-defining. I do not think Zamasu is the best deck in format. This has been proven. This is not just my opinion. This has been proven by the fact that this deck has 3 tops? 4 tops? Right? But it's been one person. Right? So this isn't like 30%, 25%, a half of the meta in Top Cut is Zamasu. It's not going to happen. The other reason why it's not going to happen is because red is so prominent in this next format. There's various decks that all have basically one-drop answers to Zamasu's concept of having these indestructible milling cards, and you sort of just a hard insta-lose to red. Now, reason why Zamasu is in this gatekeeping category. So all the decks that are in Z tier, to me, have very positive, consistent win matchups against Zamasu. Just for me, right? That's one of the, I think one of the criteria is to being able to be considered a Z tier deck for me is going to be able to have a complete, just like you can win this matchup, not say easily, but you have all the tools to win this matchup, and you should generally just win this matchup every time you play it. A tier decks are decks that should be able to beat Zamasu or have the ability of doing something to get past Zamasu, right? So you would think, well, if I'm talking this much about Zamasu and I'm giving it its own tier, wouldn't that make it meta-defining? No, it doesn't. The reason is, as I said it before, like I said, this deck cannot be tier 1 if An entire color counters this deck. And not just a color, the most popular color going into next set overall, right? So it can't be. It can't be tier 1, right? You think of like the contrast of Icarus and Cell Surge. This is an example I've used before. So in that format, the Icarus format, Icarus was the meta-defining deck. Icarus was the best deck in the format. I know they just banned Bojack, Aegis at that time. Icarus was still the deck, right? You take Icarus, the boogeyman of that format, the gatekeeper, was Cell Surge. Was the boogeyman. Everyone was worried about Cell Surge. Everyone was siding Deborahs. Actually, there's people handing out Deborahs at the event, right? So that deck, was it meta-defining? No. But do you have to make sure that you're able to deal with the deck? Absolutely. So there's, you could say it one way or the other, like I said. To me, I don't think this deck really belongs. Actually, this probably makes a little more sense to do it this way, so you guys can see it. Because this is kind of how I'm talking about it. All right, so these are decks. So, yeah. Okay, so hopefully we're on the same page. All right, so we'll start with, I have Kid Q here, which I think is a great place to start. Since Kid Q did receive nerfs right before Nationals in February, which I think if we would have had Nationals in February, I think Kid Q would have been... I had Kid Q, I think, in A tier at the time. I think still Kid Q is probably going to be one of the best decks at this tournament. Number of different reasons, right? Obviously, has the answers to Zamasu. Has barrier removal. Plays giant 30k bodies. This deck has a lot of really powerful tools. So one problem with Kid Q. There's another red deck that came out that people might stray away from playing Kid Q. That does not mean Kid Q doesn't make Kid Q any worse. It just means that Kid Q is probably going to be more of a niche pick in some of these regards. Like, it's probably going to be still one of the highest represented decks, but I think it's going to be outshined by a few other decks when it comes to representation overall. And there's no way of really finding that out. We can just look at Top Cut. Okay? So, Kid Q also did get a new tool, and all red decks did get this new tool as well, which is the Piccolo Junior Unison. That card has been unerrated. This card has been, well, not unerrated, but unlimited. It was limited for 3 years, almost 4 years, I think. A little bit longer than that. It's crazy that card is gone. And that card's been gone that long, and now it's back. So, that card, if you guys don't know, it's a 15k Unison. You draw a card. If your opponent activates a counter skill, you blow up a 15k battle card, essentially turning token negates completely useless against red. They were already not great, but like now you can't happily play token negate into red because they'll just blow it up with the Piccolo and not have to spend any extra energy. Now we have Vegito. Vegito was one of my choices for best deck in format. Problem with Vegito is that Beyond All Limits was hit. Now this is a deck that is affected by Beyond All Limits for consistency. If you mill your Vegitos or you mill other pieces, you can't get that stuff back now. I think this deck now kind of falls all the way down here. And it lacks consistency. Right? Now without Beyond All Limits, this deck lacks consistency. What Bandai has to do to make this deck better, you need to add preferably realistically, they should add other Vegito Xeno targets. I'm really upset that the Overrealm target doesn't have Union Patora. I feel like that was a waste. Or Xeno Patora, whatever the fuck it's called. That it should really have that. Because that would have been really cool to actually have another target. Right now you just have the 6-drop. And maybe have a card that can search Vegito Xeno cards, right? that we don't have to play the stupid SS4 call. Like, there's a few things that they could do. Who knows? Might get some anniversary support. That'd be really cool. But unfortunately, now the deck's dropped all the way down the C tier and just probably isn't good enough to even get you past like a X2, probably at the cap. Next we have Kaba. I think Kaba's trash. There's gonna be a few decks on this list that I'm gonna say this very same sentiment about. Kaba had the art of surprise, right? It had that little special advantage over everybody else because no one knew what the deck did, right? It got support, no one knew what the deck did. I think it's not good enough. Blue in itself is in a really tough spot. This deck, I don't think it has enough power, enough punchback to really be considered a competitive deck. It just doesn't. Again, I think this deck was able to do as well as it did in the one event. I think it ended up topping 2 events. But it was able to do that well just from the lack of playability from other people and people just having card knowledge of Kaba. So, I wouldn't have known. I've played against Kaba once in my life. So, but no, this deck is trash. Wouldn't play it. Next we have Gamma, which is the opposite side of this. Gamma is not trash. I think Gamma will probably be one of the most represented blue decks. However, I think there's a few problems with this deck. One, its hand size is really bad, right? You're sitting probably between 7 and 9, when average decks now are sitting between like 11 and 15, right? On the turn that you get like your max peak hand size, right? Unless you're taking life, your energy's probably, your hand's probably a little bit lower than that if you have high life, right? The deck itself has a lot of good tools. You have all the old Gamma support. You have all the new Gamma support. You have the old boss monster. You have the new boss monster. You have a Floodgate in the archetype. You have Pilaf Shumai. You have Android 17. You have a counterplay. You got a lot of shit. This deck can do really well into some of the decks you're going to see in the meta, at the top here. But as your board gets removed, I think it becomes harder for this deck to kind of establish itself. Because of that, I'm going to put it in Rogue tier. I think it will be one of the most played blue decks, and you could say, well, that means it's not Rogue tier, right? Because Rogue's going to be lesser represented decks. I just think in this grand scheme of how well this deck's going to perform, I think it's down here. And I don't exactly know how the Zamasu matchup goes with it. Because you're putting cards from your life, from your deck into your energy. So you're kind of doing the milling for them a little bit. I don't know. So I would love to be proven wrong, but I think it's probably in B tier. We have Hatchiyak. Hatchiyak's probably in B tier as well. I won't spend too much time on this deck, but anytime that red's good, Hatchiyak is good. The problem is that this deck is incredibly boring, and from someone who's played this deck a lot, just move on. Play something else. Honestly, I would rather than just ban this leader. I think it promotes a bad sense of game mechanics. I think this deck, the leader itself, just needs to be gone. Too many people who don't know how to play Dragon Ball will just sit behind 30 negates, right? And you just stall. And I was one of those people. I get it. It was one of the first decks I picked up. It's incredibly easy to play at that sense because you have so much protection. But it's so boring. And in how the game has evolved over time, this deck has not really... It's kind of just stayed the same, right? There's not much that this deck can evolve into. And I think they need to just create a new Hatchiyak leader and maybe just create a different effect. It's cool. I think the Floodgate part's cool, but I think it should be put onto a card, not the leader. But with saying all that negative stuff, again, it's probably Rogue tier because of how good red is. But it's boring. If you play this deck in 2025, like what the fuck are you doing? Go play a different deck. Like this, you should not be playing this deck. But it is rogue tier. So we have SS3. So SS3 recently just won the most recent LCQ, and no disrespect to the guy who played the deck, who won. This deck shouldn't have won the event. This deck only won solely for the fact that nobody was paying attention to blue. That's it. That is the only reason. There's nothing else. The deck itself is not good. It's a super stall deck. It doesn't do anything. It plays probably just as many negates as Hatchiyak does. Retains a bunch of energy. All the battle cards, realistically, most of the battle cards in the deck are really shitty, except for like the Broly and if they play Oob. But the deck is just super, super boring. This deck dies to aggro. And it doesn't draw. Like it's such a stupid deck. There's a reason why this leader was banned in the first place, right? I think this deck also needs to go, just for the fact that people don't play it, right? Like restanding 5 energy on a turn, and then having like floodgates is just such a stupid concept. I'm gonna put this deck in C tier. I think it lacks. I think it lacks design. I won't say it lacks design, but so all the negative parts aside, the deck is just too slow. I think if blue needs, and this deck can only charge to 6 energy as well, they need a different identity. And I like Gamma. I like the blue Broly concept. I like blue Boo. These are some cool concepts that don't just revolve around generic, let me restand 10 energy, right? Obviously, old Gamma was, right? But I think this concept of blue decks just needs to be just remove them from the game. Like, we don't need these type of leaders in the game. Like, it's just go create a new deck that maybe has the ability of maybe restanding an energy or so. But, like, restanding 5 energy in a turn is just, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. And if you play this deck, like what the fuck are you doing? Like it's such a handicap deck. Like, for real, like, you can, it's very similar to Hatchiyak, where you can essentially just hide behind the fact that your deck just kind of does the things for you, and then your brain really doesn't have to think as much. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think this deck just needs to go as well. We have Red Cooler. Arguably, probably still Rogue. I would probably put the mill deck. It's probably like right here. I don't think it could be considered meta, or even like really highly competitive, just because of the amount of Koitsukai that you're gonna see in side decks. Every deck is gonna be siding Koitsukai, and that just instantly hurts Cooler. There's a lot of other decks now that are going to be playing, that are really kind of focusing on more playing unisons, which there's some decks that can just flat out just play unisons and just, you can't ever do any milling. It will beat very bad players. Black has always sort of had a bad matchup into Cooler because of the amount of milling that they do. With Black sort of taking a back seat with the Beyond All Limits hit, you might not see as much Black, meaning you're not going to have as easier time just getting that secondary win con off. So I think because of that, it's probably gonna be Rogue. If Black was gonna be more prominent, I think we have there's some good Black decks still left, but I think it'd be more up here if I thought like Black was gonna be like the best color. We have Shroom and Salsa. Unfortunately, Shroom and Salsa did miss its small window that it had. This was the deck I was gonna take the Nats in February, and I played a black-red version of this deck, which I might do a deck profile on it at some point. But this deck could handle every single meta deck without question. The problem is that it folds to decks that have the ability to refuel their drop area. So one problem is that Black in this current format, the two Black decks that we'll end up talking about, both have the very easy ways of recurring their drop area, and then I can't draw. Can't do your leader effect. So in those matchups, it's basically really difficult. However, this deck still has a very good matchup in the Kidku, a very good matchup in the Nova. And those are probably two of the best decks in the game. And then you do have the way of kind of beating Zamasu. But Zamasu is really difficult. So because of that, we're going to put it in Rogue as well. It's just not going to be, it's not universally known as a good deck. And I think it missed its small window where there's really the only other black deck was Vegito and Goku Zeno. And both of those decks you have winning matchups into. Now with the other two black decks, it's not so much. Next we have Nameku. So Nameku I would put in A tier. So Nameku is still very strong. It's been getting a lot of representation. My problem with the deck is that some of these matchups in the Z tier section here just have better tools, right? Green got one really good tool in this new set, which is the 5-drop Gohan. I'm sure you played it in this deck. It's a blocker, right? So like it has a lot of usage there with the Unison. There is some Unison removal in this new set. So if any of that stuff gets played, once your Unison dies once, your deck starts to slow down a lot, right? That's one less draw per turn. You don't have access to free Dormant. So if you can kill that Unison, kind of similar to Vegito, the deck starts slowing down a little bit. Now you do have the ability of still drawing extra cards because your leader essentially can draw 2 cards and you're a 20k leader, so that's really cool. However, like I said, I think the Unison part kind of slows it down a little bit, so where it's not going to be in Z tier. Although it should be in Z tier. Actually, it should. I think I just have to. You know what? I think I have to put it in Z tier just because of the amount of people that are playing it. I don't think I can put it in A tier, unfortunately. I think it's going to be kind of at the back part of Z tier, but it's I can't put it because it's top so much. It's hard to put it in A tier. Okay, next is Power Pull. Not Power Pull. This is Power Wish. I mean, it's not much better. This card's going to go in C tier. Probably right here. It lacks affordability. I think that's the big thing. It's not a great deck. It would probably be considered like realistically probably Rogue, but because of how expensive all of the Unison rares are, it's just not fathomable for most people to play this deck, right? Like you have to have the anniversary box, and then you have to archetype super cheap. Then you need at least one blue Unison, which is already running you over $100. That's not including like a secret rare and other stuff. So yeah, I just don't think it's really affordable for a lot of people. And the deck's not even that good to begin with. It's again kind of a rogue deck. It does a lot of stuff. It plays a lot of like rainbow cards, but it's really cute, really cool concept, but just not competitively. It's going to be the most viable. We have Cumber. Cumber is really only missing a good Floodgate. If Black gets just a really strong battle card Floodgate, Cumber is going to be like A tier. It's really good. In this current format, Cumber has a good matchup into Kidku, has a good matchup into Dark Vegeta, which is the red Vegeta. Has a good matchup into Nova. You can basically bottom deck all of their cards in your drawing. You can technically beat Zamasu as well. You can play the red-black Gogeta, so you can neg the cards. I think it's actually okay. It's probably going to be... I'm still going to put it in C tier just because it's never actually... It hasn't topped in like a year and a half. It lacks a Floodgate. I think it just lacks better defense. And unfortunately, like the best thing you could do defensive-wise is switch your secret rare to Pan Zeno instead of playing Evil Saiyan. But you're just missing out on playing Evil Saiyan, so it's kind of a catch-22 there. And speaking of Vegeta, we have Dark Vegeta here, which is that's just the name I'm going to coin because it is a kind of resembles a little bit of Dark Broly in some senses with its black cards, but this deck just spams the board, man. It has so much value. This is definitely going to be an A tier deck. I'm actually going to put it right, probably like right here. So Red Vegeta is probably the new red deck that people are going to play. I think it's going to be a toss-up between Kidku now and Vegeta as what deck probably has the highest chance of winning Nationals. One of these two decks probably will win. These decks in general will be in Top Cut, though. You're probably going to see a lot of Vegeta. Vegeta's really, really, really strong. He has tons of... everything's one cost. Everything draws. You have two different bodies you can play for free from the Warp. And you have Overwhelm. Like, you have more recursion. You have more drop area recursion than any other black deck in the game. It's insane. You have a free combo once per turn. You don't have to attack to draw. Like it's everything you possibly want. This is everything I've wanted in a black leader. Like this is like if God Trunks was good, right? Like God Trunks hasn't been good for a very, very long time. It was, some might even consider it wasn't really good in the begin with, but this deck is what God Trunks would love to be. It's fantastic. Is it broken? Could be considered broken. But I think you really have to just know you have to be prepared for this deck. I know people kind of know already how to play against Kidku, but you should probably get some testing in against Vegeta, because if you don't, you'll just get steamrolled. Quite frankly, this deck is crazy. We have Frieza. We have Successor Frieza. Okay, all right. So, hot take. This deck got a lot better with the changes to the new Zarbon card that they received, which allows you to go into your Successor pieces for cheaper. I think this deck is really good. I'm actually going to... I think I might actually build this deck. Not for Nationals, because I'm not going this year, unfortunately, but maybe just for fun. This deck's really cool. You use all of your opponent's cards as Successor pieces, which is awesome. And it's Frieza, man. It's such a cool deck. It's probably the best green-yellow deck, which is weird because we don't have any really good green-yellow strategies. Actually, it's probably the weakest. I'm trying to think. It's probably the weakest color combination I think we've ever had. I know green-red isn't very good, but yeah, green-yellow has never been good. So this is probably the closest thing we're going to get to it. It's a green leader, obviously, so it has Dormant. You have access to Flying Nimbus. It's got a lot of positives. Man. But I think with the new Zarbon, I think this deck definitely takes a step up. And I'm going to move this around a little bit. I think Cooler should be up here. But I think this deck can surprise people. And if I was going to Nats, I wouldn't be playing this deck, because I would have a way better option than this. But this is a really fun deck, and definitely something that people should play, in your spare time, or for locals, or for maybe you already have your invite and you want to play another deck. This is a super fun deck to play. Then we have Bojack. I think this deck is just underplayed. I'm going to put it in B tier. The new support's very good. I just think this deck's super underplayed. The deck weakness, I feel like the deck doesn't draw a lot, right? The leader doesn't draw anymore. You're playing all your stuff from your energy. That's pretty cool. So there's a reason why this deck's only topped with 2 or 3 people ever. So it's better now with the new support. It got an SR, and it got another battle card in the deck. So it definitely got better. If it didn't get that support, I probably would have put it in C tier or D tier. But now I think it's probably considered rogue, and definitely something that could make a little bit of noise. Maybe go X2 or something. Bardock, I'm gonna put in C, tier C. Bardock is missing I think really what Bardock needs, it needs a Z leader that gives all of your 2 and 3 cost multicolor cards 5k, just permanently. So that way your cards are, instead of 16Ks or 21Ks. That's really the only thing that the deck's missing. It has a ton of awesome tools and a lot of utility, but it's just power crept. The cards are just really weak, and you're having to go this weird route of paying extra energy to play out 1-cost cards when every other deck can play a 20k that draws a card for 1 energy. So it needs a little more help. Maybe effect on the Z leader as well, where you can draw and then play a 2-cost from your hand for free. That'd be really good. We have Cell. I actually don't think Cell's that good, quite frankly. Every content creator, including myself, have been putting this deck in A tier and meta defining for so long, and it hasn't done anything in 4 events, right? No one's playing it. Why are we still putting it meta defining? It's just it doesn't belong there. Nothing's changed. The deck still has all the same pieces. It didn't receive any new support really with the new set. I guess you can consider the blue green cell as technical support if you want to go that route. I just don't think it's that great. I guess the way where it might kind of find itself being somewhat viable is that the deck had a positive matchup into Kidku. So that might kind of save it, is that if you end up playing against like a Kidku, you can kind of wipe the floor with them, because you can just activate main and just pop all of their cards. So it makes it really hard for them to stick stuff on board. We have Goku Xeno. Okay. I'm going to put it in B tier as well. A lot of these decks I just don't think are very good. Like, a lot of these decks I just don't think can compete at a really high level. So the thing with Goku, I'll put Goku right here. The thing with Goku is that the Beyond the Limits hit did hurt a lot, obviously. You still have the extra cards, so like you're able to recur some of your Gokus, but that was like the best one, right? Like you would mill a Beyond the Limits, you activate your extra card effect, you then grab a Beyond the Limits back, and now you have access to it, right? This deck is super Glass Cannon, and playing it more mid range just doesn't feel good. Like if you don't kill someone by like turn 2, it's the deck slowly starts to fall off. And actually, not slowly. It like plateau. It just like cliff. Like it goes down. So if you can high roll without Beyond the Limits and Heat Divided Spirit, maybe. But now instead of playing those 30Ks, now you're playing 15Ks and 20Ks and potentially going into a Vegito. It's just not as good. It's just not as good anymore. We have Red Vegito. I think it just lacks better cards. I think it's deck's been power crept. U7. Okay. So now we're trying to get to the good cards. So U7. I think U7 is competitive. It's been nerfed twice. Right, the Z extra was limited. They also limited the 6-drop. The deck has become sort of like just universally just a generic yellow deck now. I think where this deck lacks is removal. And it's weird, you think, right? Like the deck has removal built into it, but with some of these decks like Kidku, Vegeta, like these decks can spam the board really, really wide. And if you can't remove them, you just die. Like you just slowly start to bleed and hemorrhage cards to the point where you just die. And that's really difficult to deal with because yellow's been so good for so long. And this is the first format where yellow, excluding Nova, yellow just doesn't seem to be that good. Now, on the pivot side, U7 has access to all the cards that it needs to do well. It's if you see them, which you possibly will because you draw a lot. And also if that person decides to play those cards in their deck. Like, there's a lot of cards you can play that have removal to them. There's just a lot of choices. So I think one of the also cool things that U7 has access to is that the secret rare capabilities of this deck are so widespread, right? Like you have Yano, you can play the Victory Strike, you can play Gogeta, you can play Purunga, you can play Bardock, you can play Gohan Piccolo. You have so many targets, it's kind of hard to figure out what your opponent's playing. Because a lot of people probably would expect like the Victory Strike or maybe Purunga or Gogeta, but you hit him with a Yano, you're tapping 2 energy that turn, it might just be curtains. Like, it's really difficult to figure out how to play into this deck because you don't know what their late game is going to be, right? The middle of this deck, like the mid-range part of this deck, is really good. The engine's really good, but the late game is so lackluster without the secret rare, and you have to figure out what the secret rare is. But also, your opponent needs to make sure that they can utilize their secret rare, because that's the thing. If you don't see the secret rare, like, the deck has a really hard time actually trying to kill. So, other than that, like I said, I think the deck just also punishes decks that go low in life. You can obviously still burn them, technically from 2. So there's still a lot to actually play with this deck. It's got a lot left in the tank. I think it will end up doing well. possibly topping, hopefully topping. Next we have Revived Piccolo. I'm gonna put Piccolo in C tier. I think the amount of it lacks a better matchup into red. I'm pretty sure with Piccolo, even though the field spell says that if a card's KO'd, it's if a card's removed by a skill, it's KO'd instead or something. I think game mechanic still trumps that, so the card would still go to the drop. So with the amount of red that we're gonna have in the format, I just don't think it can be relevant. Even without the red cards, like it's still like it kind of goes wide. It doesn't really necessarily draw cards, but the whole point of the deck is sort of being sort of like this wide aggro deck that can kind of revive its cards and continuously attack. It does have a lot of 10k combos. The whole deck is 10k combos, so it's like a Fusion World deck. Like that's really cool. But it's I think it lacks just better matchups into red for it to be considered for it to be taken seriously. Then we have Green Vegito. I'm gonna put Green Vegito in competitive as well. Recently just topped. I think it's people are not playing it, and I think that's the only reason why we're not seeing it a lot. It's just people aren't playing it. Like this deck is really really good. Is it good? Is it better than Namek-Ku? It might be to some extent because of the boss monster. The generic boss monster for this deck is just incredibly good. And other than black, no other deck really has the ability of removing a 35k barrier card that also burns you alive and swings 3 times. Like that's really difficult to get rid of. So I think Vegito actually is super super solid. I think people should play it. Has access to all the same tools that Namek-Ku does. It's just not as generic because you have to play like the fusion pieces. You have to play the Batora card. So it's a little bit different in that regards, but I think the boss monsters are better in Vegito. We have Nova. Nova's top tier here. I think Nova. I'm going to put Nova at number 1 because it's seeing probably the most representation still. It's been doing well for so long. It was already picked sort of as a counter to Kid-Ku, and now with Kid-Ku not being able to neg unisons, the unison's just going to live longer, and I think the deck's going to still do better as long as the person doesn't cheat. Nova should do very well. It's probably front runner for winning the event, for winning nationals and potentially worlds. However, I don't think it will win worlds. I think we're gonna have a new deck, like a deck from the new set win worlds. I just got a feeling. We have Future Gohan. I'm going to put Future Gohan in competitive as well. The deck is still incredibly solid. Takes care of Zamasu very well. The engine's still really good, even though the Double Strike Trunks was limited to 1. It's still really good, man. You got a bunch of new tools with the new red support. So, yeah, it's kind of like your generic go-to red deck, I feel like. From previous sets, I think now it's going to be Vegeta, but I think Gohan's like right there. We have Soul Striker. Okay. All right, so this is going to pain me because I fucking hate this deck. I've talked about this a lot. I've always just put this deck in really low tiers just because I hate talking about it, but I think this is probably the one time I'm going to say this, is that Soul Striker has a very good chance of being the best blue deck in the format. The deck has... It's probably obviously it's still probably the most generic blue deck, right? It's always been very generic. Unlike Super Saiyan 3, which I consider a repulsive deck. I hate Soul Striker, but the one thing with Soul Striker is that you do have to attack the draw. So like you do actually get to attack the draw. You actually can kind of play the game in that sense. You're restanding energy on your turn, but it's 2 energy. That can obviously multiply into more depending on what card you play. But man, I really think it might be good. I've kind of been convinced. I've built the deck myself, and I'm like, holy shit, this is really good. It probably will top. One cool thing is, so I think Vegeta is going to be a deck that a lot of people just need to try to figure out. Soul Striker does have a lot of tools to deal with Vegeta. So like one of the best ways of dealing with Vegeta's cards is either Z-charging them or bottom decking them. Because drop area, at least for the black cards, like drop area and warp, like you can just play them back out. But being able to bottom deck stuff and multiple stuff at a time as well, I think it's a very solid choice for people if they want to play blue. It will probably surprise some people as well. because I don't think people are going to be expecting to play against Soul Striker again unless their testing partner or something has it. We have Pan. I also think Pan is competitive. I think Pan is probably like right here. Pan's really good, man. And we have yet to see Pan fully reach its actual like peak in performance yet. It hasn't actually had that ability to do that. We've seen it do well in events. I know like there's not many people who play the deck. There's like one or two people who actually end up topping with it all the time. But those two guys, I'm just waiting for someone to get into. I hope one of the Pan players that I've played against, I hope they top so I can see them play on stream. Like I would love to see a Pan player get in the top 16, get a best of 3. Would love to see that. Deck just keeps getting better and better because of the more red support that comes out, the more red Saiyan support that comes out. Like this deck just going to continue to do well. It's getting more and more tools all the time. It's gotten 2 anniversary box supports, so it should be good. Not much to say about it that's bad. It's a really solid deck. Next we get Jiren. Man, we're getting all the good decks at once here. I like this. So Jiren is my pick for Dark Horse of the event. I'm going to put this deck all the way up here in A tier. So, Jiren is my pick. Say it now. It's my pick for winning Nationals. It's my pick. It's my Dark Horse pick. I think this deck is very, very good. And if you think the deck is bad, I challenge you, play against somebody who knows how to play the deck. I'll play against some of you guys. This deck is really good. So what this deck has, for one, you have very strong unisons, right? And when you're playing against someone who potentially might, Nimbus you, it's like yellow, you could just instantly swing through yellow, right? No mecha phrases, doesn't matter. Your unisons are generally 25 to 40k, which also is incredibly difficult to deal with. You have every marker on your unison basically counts as a 5k combo in hand because your leader can activate battle as many times as you want on either turn. And then the archetype cards, the actual 4 archetype cards, all draw cards, and all have really powerful effects. The deck is super solid. It also is one of the only decks now that has unison removal. It just has unison removal built into the deck, as well as widespread board removal. I think it's probably my favorite deck in the set. It was Vegeta, which I still love Vegeta, but I've been playing and testing a lot of Jiren, and it's really fun. It's definitely with not playing red for 3 years and coming back to playing, it's such a fun, refreshing take on a red deck, and it's Jiren. Jiren's awesome. So we have Majin Vegeta, which I would put into Rogue tier. Put it right here. Majin Vegeta is, I think it's just not as prominent anymore. Again, yellow is a really weird spot. There's not a lot of great yellow decks. And Nova is really locked to all of the Nova. You're mainly primarily playing Shadow Dragons, and then all of the extra cards are either extra cards. All of the different non-Shadow Dragon cards are either extra cards or they're negates Bardock and things like that. And then U7, you have to run so many U7 cards, kind of the same thing. Your tech options are kind of bare minimum. I mean, this deck plays the Majin Vegeta cards better than Majin Vegeta plays Majin Vegeta. It did receive recently anniversary box support, so that's kind of cool. But I still don't think it's there. Blue Gogeta, BR, trash. I will put this deck in trash tier for the rest of existence of this game until it tops. It's such a disappointment. This deck should have been really good. The archetype is basically just generic, and everything draws and removal. It's so cool, but no one plays it. It's such a waste of of a really beautiful SLR too. So, yeah, I'm gonna put it in D tier until it decides to top. Moving on to Pan Zeno. So, Here comes one of my hot takes. I think Pan's going to be meta defining for black. So before people start freaking out, oh, the Beyond the Limits ban. Shut up. Deck doesn't need Beyond the Limits. Does not need Beyond. Does not need it. So, the one problem with this deck is a very similar thing to Vegito, where that you need to get to the combo step to be able to draw. Right. That's the only downside. Right. The rest of this deck, though, you have a very powerful Z battle card, right, which you can technically get out turn 2 if you attack first. Right. That's really cool. Secondly, you have a very, 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 very good set of promos that came out with this deck. One obviously being the Goku. It's a 25k, so it gets around Koitsukai. It's a hard negate, draws you a card. Burst cards, which is very important, gives your leader 5k. Not to mention the counterplay, which can also give your leader 5k, right? Second part of this is my biggest complaint with black, is that black has one card currently that's generic. It's a 2 cost that can board wipe. That's the only card. It's a Finn. I forgot what the actual, like coercion or something. Coercion Incarnate. That's the only card that black has access to board wipe for 2 energy, right? Pan can do that for free with the Trunks promo. Now you need a Z energy cost of cards in your battle area, blah, 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 but you can do that. That's really good. That Trunks card, I think, single-handedly makes Pan viable. Because, as I said the same thing with like Soul Striker, being able to deal with a wide board, right? Jiren can also deal with wide boards. Nova, Kid Ku can kind of do that as well. One thing Pan can do, Pan can deal with lower battle cards. Pan can deal with high battle cards, right? Low battle cards, anything 6 or less, use Trunks, right? Trunks can, if you have 3 Z energy worth of cards in your battle area, whether it's 1 battle card or it's a Z extra card or whatever it is, actually, or Z unisons as well, I believe it works with. You just warp that many cards. You have 3, you warp 3 cards for free, right? It's super solid. You deal with if you deal with all the big cards, you have a lot of spot removal, but also you can play the Bardock Overrealm, which I think is a very underrated tech card that people aren't playing. It gets rid of anything 6 cost or more. You can play that in the Nova very well, right? Most green decks play 7 and 8 cost cards, right? Blue plays a lot of 8 cost cards, right? So you can just remove stuff. So I think Pan is going to be considered more of, I think the way that Pan should be played is more mid range. You can definitely turn on the gas and go aggro with the Z battle card, but you don't have to do that. This is probably still going to be probably, I think people aren't going to play it, but this is again just my choice. This would be one of my choices for nationals. If I was going, it would be this, or it would be between this and Jiren, for sure, for me. If I really wanted to play black, I would play Pan. Next we have Gohan Superhero. I think it just lacks hand size. It's just not good anymore. I think it kind of missed its window where it was okay. All right. So you get the Broly. Broly. Okay. I'm gonna get flamed for this probably. Maybe. I think this deck is hot garbage. I'll put it right here. So Broly, and I don't know how we got to this. I don't know how we got to this point. I think this deck should be much better than what it is. The archetype itself, like if you read the cards, like it's crazy good. Like all the cards are fantastic. Rudigarm's fantastic. Garlic, fantastic. Metacooler, even the Bio Broly's good. The SR, super good. The Z Extra that basically acts as a floodgate, super good. Like all this stuff is really good. Why is it not considered a good deck? So, for one, depending on what your secret rare is, right? Once you get to 4 energy, you're not really charging anymore, right? Because your leader effect, you have to tap out in order to get the full effect every turn, right? So, of course, you can play Gogeta. That can be your secret rare, right? If you're playing anything else, your secret rares don't tap. None of those tap you out. There's some intricate ways where you can tap out, like if you have a Janempa on board already. If you have a Tapion Unison still, you can, when you play a card, you can tap energy off those effects. So technically, you can go up to, I think, 6 energy. If you have a Janempa and a Unison on board, you can tap out. Other than that, if you can't board a Janempa and it stays on board, you can't keep your Unison on board. You now start to fall behind to where, like, turn 2, you play your Unison. Turn 3 is supposed to be Explorer Bulma, where you're able to restand 2 energy and draw a card, right? So you can play, you play Bulma, you activate your leader effect, draw a card, play a card, get 10k, use Bulma effect, restand 2, draw a card, play a card, right? Like you do all that shit. Now you have defense, right? That's ideal. And then you have defense, you can activate whatever on defense and draw a card. Turn 4, the idea is that if your Unison's still alive, now you're able to play another Explorer Bulma, use the Tapion effect to tap another energy to tap out, do the same thing. Play, then you can play a card. That's not always going to happen. Also, there is a 10-cent card in every single color. They are called the Cunnings. Or in black, it's called Ghost Warrior. This one card you play one time completely shuts off the Broly deck. A deck cannot be good when it loses to a 10-cent card. It's impossible. For the rest, and for people who don't know what the cunning cards do, they are 1-drop cantrips. Every color has one. For the rest of the game, if either player attempts to restand an energy by an effect of an extra card, or I think it's just a non-leader card skill, on their turn, they have to warp 5 cards from their drop area each time. It's not a huge requirement, you would think, but Broly's not going to have a huge warp. I mean, Broly's not going to have a huge drop to be able to warp those cards. So Explorer Bulma doesn't work. So now I'm tapping out on turn 3 to play like a Garlic, to play another Garlic. And oh wait, yeah, both of these cards have Indestructible. That's super good, except we're in a red format. And these cards just die to 1 energy card. So like, they're not good. There's a lot of gas being blown up people's asses with people thinking this deck is like tough shit. It's not. Again, blue is going to be somewhat popular because of it just winning an event. I think people aren't expecting blue. You side a Cunning card, you instantly just win against Broly. You see the card, you win. Right? Obviously, if you see it like turn 5 or turn 6, it doesn't matter. But I'm saying best case scenario, right? You play the Cunning card, Broly can't actually play the game. So, you can debate me if you want. Buy up the cards. It's fine. Personally, I would like people to not play the deck so I can buy the SLR for my collection, because I think I want it to be like $20 or $30. But it's just not a good deck. It's just not a good deck. So right now, I think they designed it a little poorly with the leader effect. It should have said, like, if you tap 3 energy or more, or like they should have given some of the cards like the effect of like restanding energy, or make them actually not cost like 3 and 4 energy. I don't know. So Bandai did their big one with this deck. Next we have Adventure Time Goku. I'm also going to consider this deck meta. Not meta defining, but it's definitely going to go in the meta here. This is a really cool deck. The archetype, I mean, everything's 1 cost, right? You're playing 1 cost cards, you're drawing. You can actually free play stuff as well. This archetype is really good. It's got Unison removal. It's got hand destruction. You can play like more hand destruction as well. This leader goes through its deck really, really quickly. I think this is one of the underrated green decks going into this next format. And I've been told by people who play a lot of green that this deck has a good matchup into the green Saiyan leaders. So that's actually kind of good as well. The one problem is that if you match up against a lot of red, your Bulma effect basically is non-existent. The Bulma effect makes it so that your battle cards that are adventure non-Bulmas can't be removed by skills. However, red will just neg that card, so they'll just kill it. Next is Gogeta Aegis. This is probably not a bad deck. Deck draws a ton. I actually think this deck would be considered. I would actually consider it competitive. I think. Well, no, I'll put it. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'll put it in B tier. I think actually I'll put it a little bit above Gamma. A lot of red doesn't bode well, but everything else isn't too bad. The deck's very, very late game. Obviously, this is a control deck. In a different way than something like SS3 or like Hatchiak or something, because this deck's gonna go the distance. But this deck actually is doing things. Like, it's playing really strong battle cards. They can tap your cards. You have like a triple strike effect with your leader potentially. I think this is a very good deck. People should play. This would be my choice if I was playing a blue deck. Would probably be between this and Soul Striker. It just depends on if you want more generic value in Soul Striker, or if you want the like the more slow paced control style of Gogeta. But I think both of these are definitely interesting concepts for Nationals. Next we have Rainbow Gogeta. I think this card is competitive. I think one cool thing about this deck is that it can go really, really wide. And if your opponent cannot remove multiple 8-drops on board, you can have like 10 battle cards on board, which is crazy. It has a stop button once per game with its Z extra card. You naturally are going to play the successor cards. You naturally play the Gogeta secret rare. You charge every color in the game, so you have access to like Buljin Negate. You have access to just other generic stuff like Bardock Overrealm. You instantly beat Zamasu because you have a promo that stops you from milling. You basically put your entire deck back into your entire drop back into your deck. It's very good. I think this is going to be a deck that has a very high skill cap though. So that's something. A very high floor. So I used to do this in a lot of my videos, and I stopped because I feel like it was confusing the casual fan, where we were talking about decks that have high ceilings and high floors, and a lot of people weren't getting the concept. So I stopped including it in my tier list videos. But a floor is what you consider like the entry point to something. So like the floor would be like the entry point of like how to learn how to play this deck at a very good level, and then the ceiling is obviously the peak, the cap of where this deck potentially could be. And I think Gogeta has a high floor and a high ceiling. It's very good, but it's going to take someone who really masters the deck and understands all the ins and outs of these interactions with being able to draw cards and when to play your activate battles and stuff like that, for it to be really, really utilized in a high capacity. But I think it can be very good. It probably just won't be for the casual fans. So it's definitely going to be a deck like if I was doing the high floor, high ceiling, this would be in that category. Next we have Superfu, which I would consider to be Rogue. It did receive a little bit of support. Again, we're going into a red format. So with red, Fu kind of folds to red. You can't play your Z battle card. It just dies to everything that red plays. And that's a huge part of your engine. Now you can say, well, I just won't play the 6-drops. Well, you're not playing your deck optimally then. You're not playing a portion of your deck. You can play like the Superfus and the 7-drop Cumber, and you can kind of go around that stuff and maybe play the cooler cards. So that's kind of cool, but you're not getting the full value out of your deck. And I just think it's just a little too weak. The Fu that has barrier, you technically can play that. But now you're waiting. You have to basically spend an energy. Here's the other problem, is that you have to spend an energy to play the Z extra, which you need. You have to spend an energy to play the battle card, the Z battle card, to start your chain. And then you need to spend an energy on a Chilai Z Unison to have access to the counterplay. So it's 3 energy and 3 Z energy. and by that time you're probably at like 3 life, if not lower, right? So that's really difficult to. Now, if you're playing against like a control deck, like a Gogeta or something that's going to play really slow, sure, that's good, but you can't just expect your opponent's going to be playing a slow deck, and you just kind of allowing you just to get this extra value on stuff. We have the Go Bros. I'm just going to put it in trash. I actually kind of forgot it was on my list here. It actually shouldn't even be here, so I'll put it in trash. Super 17, trash. It's never done anything. I know people keep putting it up here. They keep putting it as a good deck, and then it just never played. So we'll just put it in trash tier until it proves me wrong. I would love for it to be proven wrong because the art in this actual archetype is really cool. But funny is that the actual good cards in this deck are being played in Kitku, so it's actually being played in a better deck. So it's kind of funny. They just basically just took all of the good stuff here from Super 17. We have Golden Cooler. I'm going to put Golden Cooler in A tier. Where in A tier? That's the question. I'll probably put it right here. I think it's so one thing with like a lot of the red decks, they lose really hard to the black counterplay. And since we're not going to see as much black, you would be like, oh yeah, so now these red decks are going to be better. Well, Golden Cooler plays a unison part of its awakening condition, so it's always going to have the unison, and it should always have the counterplay, right? So Cooler already was a good deck, right? It never played Beyond All Limits really, so you don't have to worry kind of about that. It's naturally like just the Prison Planet archetype is just really good. The 8-drop's incredible, the 4-drop's incredible. You're playing cards on your opponent's turn. The one problem with this deck is you do kind of take a little bit of a hit slightly to Koizukai. You're kind of locked in then to just playing the 4-drop Cooler on your opponent's turn, which is fine. You still, you can do that. You have a lot of like extra boosting power going on with the 4-drop and the Trunkses and cycling those cards and getting extra 5 and 10Ks. Next format, so for regionals, this deck's going to be, I think, even better because it's getting 2 pieces of support. It's getting one that plays out 2 battle cards for the cost of 2 energy and itself, which is the double striker. And then it's getting a 4-drop barrier removal, which is great. So this deck's going to continue to get better. And this and Pan are probably like right there as being best black deck potentially in the game currently. Blue Vegito. Super Saiyan Blue Vegito. This is a deck that probably feels a lot like Cumber, just a weaker version of Cumber. It has very good tools. The Kaioken card is really good. The negate that I got was good. The 1-drop Mai was really good. Deck still has really good pieces, but it's a little too it just doesn't have enough, I think, when it comes to like, it's not aggressive enough, right? So it's not like a like a Goku Zeno or like a Pan. It can't go super wide. Like it has to do a lot of stuff. Like you have to set up the Z extra, you have to set up playing a Vegito, you have to set up playing the Z battle card. So you got a lot that you have to do. I think it's just too slow. It's too slow. In these decks, again, something like Cumber, because like Cumber can even go faster than a lot of these decks if it hits like the perfect turn. Like you can get the 8-drop down on turn 3 and then just start swinging. But it's slow enough. And again, these type of decks need a black floodgate, and we need something that we can use to deter our opponent from attacking us and beating our face in. And we just don't have that. We just don't have that yet. So next is Frieza Swap, which I think Frieza Swap is a very solid deck. Next format, I think with the promo support that's not legal for this format. So I guess the regional that takes place like the day before, like the weekend of Nationals, is going to be really dope because I think this deck's going to do pretty well. But for Nationals, we'll put it in Rogue tier. Put it right behind Successor. The new boss monster I got, the 10-drop, board wipe, super strong. Deck was already decent. It saw some tops previously, so I think it's okay. Definitely think it's okay. It might be better going into next format again because of the promos, but yeah, we'll see. We have green Bojack. It's probably also considered like Rogue, because it's kind of a strange pick. So we'll put it in B tier. Zeno, trash. This deck, they made Invoker very fair and honest, and that's not how Invoker should be, so can't really take it too seriously. We have Golden Frieza. Alright. Intrusive Thought is, like, my initial thought of this deck is Golden Frieza is a competitive deck. I believe it's a competitive deck. You have all of the 1-drops are really strong. It's almost like U7 in that sense, right? Like, all the 1-drops are either draw you a card or kill something or tap something or do something. You have these really big bodies that you can play also, which also have a lot of effects on it. Like, one has Offering, one has bounces something and draws you a card, has Aegis, one pops the Unison, or pops something in rest mode and takes markers off of Unison. I think Frieza is probably it's probably here. I think Frieza's competitive. Yeah, I believe in Frieza. It is one of the decks. I mean, I made it. Talked about it a lot. I think Frieza could be very good. I think it will be outshined by the fact that Nova is just such a better deck because Shadow Dragons are just really strong right now, and Frieza Clan is not. This is a very good deck. You can also turn the 10Ks into free 10K combos multiple ways. You have your leader, you have the Mercenary Tau promo as well. There's some good ways of making this deck actually like a good mid-range late game deck. The SR, and I haven't seen people talk about it a lot, but the yellow SR, the Frieza, the 25K, there's a lot of Saiyan decks, man. That guy is a 1-drop, draw 1, swing, rest mode a Saiyan card, blow it up, restand it. Like, that's really good. Yeah, I think this deck is, I think it's good. I think power-wise it is up there, like in this area. But I don't think people are going to play it a lot, sadly. Blue Boo. I think Blue Boo is also very good. I think Blue Boo is also competitive. It can push. Now with Kid Q being back in the meta, that I think pushes this deck down a little bit. Well, actually, no. The Unison actually doesn't die anymore. So, yeah. I think it's fine in A tier. Garlic. Sorry. I'm going to put it in C tier. Actually, we'll put it in B tier. Just topped. Obviously, and I just did a deck profile with it, right? So, the Garlic deck is... I think we finally, with the deck profile that we did, I think hopefully people maybe start to see the power in this deck, including myself, right? I played against it. I was like, whoa, this actually does a lot more than I thought it was going to. It's got a defensive tool you can use once per game, which is pretty cool. Spams the board out with a lot of cards. I think it loses to other red decks. Personally, I think that's sort of the problem, is that it loses to other red decks. All the indestructible stuff's cute until your power starts getting reduced. And I think that's sort of the problem. They made it very fair. Like, if you compare, like, Garlic and Vegeta power level, like, it's... Like, Garlic can play free stuff, but Vegeta can also play free stuff that's super, super, super strong. So can Kid Ku. I think that's kind of where it sort of deters. It is not an awful deck, and I hope now people kind of realize that this deck actually can be pretty good. But I do think it's just not... You have better red options to play. That's, I think, the problem. Tapion. Ooh. So, my generic brain wants us to just put Tapion in A tier. However, I'm going to put Tapion in B tier. Right here. Tapion, we'll put Tapion like right here. Tapion just hasn't really seen play. And I think it's just because, I mean, blue's been bad for a little bit, so people just didn't want to play it. Generically, it's really good still. So it's probably something that people might get caught off guard by. I think this deck could easily be an A tier. I just don't want to put it in A tier because I don't believe it's going to be played at all. And I just think these options are just better. Like the blue options that I have up here are just better. And I don't think it's better than Gamma or Aegis Goku. We have Mechigabora. I am also going to put Mechigabora up here. I'm going to put Mechigabora like right here. Yeah, Mechigabora is really good. It's really good. I think where it will defer a little bit is that you have to play out the wormhole cards. So you either have to play the 1-drop Rabilu or the Demigra that has wormhole attached to it, so you can actually wormhole. Because I think wormhole. I don't know. Yeah, like if the units, like if one of these cards are removed when you play them, I don't think you keep the wormhole effect. I think the wormhole effect goes away. So because the effect actually doesn't stay on board, I think that's a problem. So like if you're playing against a deck and they counterplay one of those cards, or like they kill it or anything, you don't keep the wormhole effect, I don't think. So that's the only one problem. Now, beside that, this deck can go really fast. Very strong boss monster, by the way. It's one of the only boss monsters that you need 3 energy to play, not your opponent need 3 energy to play. And it's a 30k double striker that plays out another card and that also warps a battle card on board. That's really good. The deck draws a ton. You'll probably have 13, 14 cards in hand on turn 2 when you awaken. And you can play the Supreme Kai of Time card in that deck is incredibly underrated. It's a generic 5 Dark Overrealm for 1 energy. You can play for free, of course. But it's got Barrier, Servant, and Blocker, and then Restand at the end of the turn. So it's a 30k body that has Barrier. It's basically Dark Broly. It's really, really strong. If you are not set up on turn 2 for defense, you'll probably go down to 3 or 4 life, and now you're kind of playing on the back foot the rest of the game, trying to just play defense. So it's really solid. I haven't seen a time where it seems to brick. I haven't seen that happen yet during my testing. And options for siding, I think it will be a little bit better. I think it will be considered meta defining once we have access to the Deborah counter card. So that card is obviously it's a silver bullet for yellow. That's fine, but it's a free Dark Overrealm. And I think that's something that this deck actually doesn't have yet, is we don't have any really good Dark Overrealms for free. Like, this costs nothing. Meaning we can use this card. It's a 4 Overrealm too, which is important. So we put 3 cards back. If we play that 5 cost Overrealm, put 3 cards back, draw a card, we only need to put 1 extra card in the drop area, and then we can play this one for free. So instead of, we can actually play 2 Dark Overrealms for free per turn, instead of paying 1 energy for one of them and then free for the other one. So that's actually just a little bit of extra value, and it's a blocker. So like that's also really cool. So this last deck, Android 21, I'm going to put it in I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to do a little, I'm going to give this its own category. And I'm going to start doing this unless the deck is just not relevant. So, Android 21, I saved this for last just to have a little bit of a monologue with it. But so the deck won Worlds last year. Typically, so the year before we had Crimson was the big deck, didn't end up making it. We had Gamma, Trunks Cheetah ended up winning. Trunks Cheetah sort of fell out of the meta, right? So I didn't get to do this last year for Trunks Cheetah because the deck was really bad. Android 21 did see a ban card, which was a really good archetype card, which was the Z battle card, the 2-drop, right? Android 21 right now, if this was in February, this deck probably would have been one of the highest percentage decks to win the event, because of the generic style of this deck, right? So what people are playing this deck as, and again, I despise this type of play style, but there are people who will play this way, where it's essentially you are just denying your opponent from playing the game, the entire game, right? I don't really like that style of play, but it is with this particular deck, it's very, very powerful. So you don't have to attack to draw on either turn, right? So you can take a life, you can search an android, you have access to peel-offs, you have access to Android 17s and D-Magics and all these other negates, right? So essentially you can stop your opponent from building Z energy. Now, last format, every deck, Vegito, Namek-Ku, Kid-Ku, all have to attack to build a Z energy, right? If you're not going to attack them and they can't attack you, they can't build Z energy. Meaning these decks can't functionally get to their turn 2, turn 3 curve and awaken and stuff, right? That's a big thing, right? You can peel off Shumai, you can stop their comboing effects, make them combo more cards from hand. Once you get the Z Unison out, you can now have access to Heroic Prospect. You have access to Bullgen, you have access to your own counterplay, like you have access to a lot of different stuff, and you can basically stall your opponent out, and then also you have the ability of regaining life. So this is like the ultimate scumbag deck, because you can basically just stall your opponent out from playing the game. There's not really much they can do about it if you have all those cards, right? I put it on the list because this deck does have a favorable matchup into Zamasu, right? All of the cards are green, so you can... actually, I think the matchup with Zamasu is probably 50-50. But all these other decks now that are in this top tier, this top A tier here, a lot of these don't actually need to like build a Z energy to awaken, so they can just start attacking and just start playing stuff, right? So that I think ends up not boding well for Android 21, but I still think it's a deck you probably will see in some capacity. So this is the tier list if you guys want to look at this, and then you guys can share this and let me know how wrong you think I am, but that's fine. This I think is pretty solid. I will, after Nats, we'll kind of report back and kind of talk about the meta and everything, but I think this is a pretty good idea of what the meta, of what I think would be considered meta, and I hope, I really hope people kind of dive into these other black decks and not just... It seems that people only play black. I've talked about this before, but people only play black when it's broken, and black wasn't even broken. Like, I know it felt broken, but black's only won one event in like 3 years. So like for them to ban Beyond All Limits, it's just because people were complaining about it. So, but these 3 decks here don't need Beyond All Limits to actually do well. So it's definitely something that people I think should kind of look into and hopefully play. So thank you guys for watching the long video. As always, like and subscribe to the channel if you guys do enjoy the content, and I will see you guys in the next video.